to fund their tax plan. What do you think about that? Then it's something that is valued by a lot of people in our country across all kinds of divides. So you have to keep looking for areas where maybe you can dig out some common ground. And I think that to some extent happened with healthcare, because when they began trying to figure out what to do with this car they'd caught and to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, you know, as was famously said by the president, healthcare is complicated. Look, I mean, I have 25 years of scars to prove that. And so all of a sudden, you might know somebody who got a subsidy on the exchange. You might know somebody living in a state that expanded Medicaid, and they have been working hard all their lives, but they made, you know, too much for Medicaid before, but now they're eligible, and they could finally go take care of that chronic condition or find out what was wrong with them. So all of a sudden it becomes personal. And the more we can personalize it, the more room there is for empathy to take place and for people to understand what's really at stake in a lot of these debates.
Thank you. So I guess, gosh, there's so many things I'd love to talk to you about, but I'll just ask one more question. And that's, I know, on a lot of people's minds, because a lot of people ask this, is let's put it this way: what's next for you? You write about Eleanor Roosevelt,
yes.
a shero who had continued throughout her career to have extraordinary public impact. I know there are lots of people here who hope that you will run again. There are no doubt others who are curious who you would encourage to run in 2020. But I think all of us are curious about what's next for you.
Well, I have to say that I really didn't think when the election turned out so badly that I would write a book right away. And so I never quite know what might be next, because I do want to kind of feel my way through it. You know, writing that book was as much for me to find answers about what happened as it was for my friends, my supporters, the voters who put their faith in me. And then I realized there were all these people, and I thought it was kind of odd, to be honest. There were all these people who were saying things like, you know, go away, don't talk. I mean, if they had left me alone, I might still be wandering in the woods. I mean, really. But, so, you know, they didn't, and I'm sitting there thinking, I don't remember them saying that to Mitt Romney or to John McCain or John Kerry or Al Gore. I don't remember that. And I'm sitting there thinking, you know, I actually got more votes than anybody except Barack Obama in 2008. It was a little bit hurtful at first, and I thought, oh, forget it, who cares, right? And I'm going to write this book, I'm going to figure out, sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes I figure out what I'm thinking by writing what I am trying to write, and then all of a sudden it becomes clearer to me. So by the time I turned in the book, I recorded the audio in July, and then, you know, it came out in September. And it's so serendipitous, because you know, a lot of what I was saying 6 months ago did not have, shall we say, much support in the press or even the public. Oh, there she goes about the Russians again, you know, all of that. And, you know, every day that goes by, we learn something else. And so I have said many times that if it had been reversed and I had been in the White House, even if I had won the office, I would have had a presidential commission that would have had subpoena power to get to the bottom of what happened. And sort of months immediately after the election, I really felt this responsibility to, okay, I've got to do this. So I will finish out this year on the book tour. I've got, I think, maybe 7 more events like this across the country, and then, you know, probably 7 or 8 more book signings. And I have to tell you, I find being with all of you, and I find these events and signings that I'm doing to be incredibly reassuring, because it's a very emotional experience for me, and I imagine, you know, for some of you as well, but seeing the energy and the determination of people, watching what happened in Virginia, which was so exciting to see people, you know, and the women who had never run for office ever, you know, getting out there and just determined to tell their truth and to do their best. It was exactly what we need right now in America, across the nation. So I'm gonna spend a lot of 2018 doing everything I can to help elect Democrats, and in particular, to help elect a majority in the House and the Senate. And I don't think that's at all far-fetched. It will be a lot of work. But for those of you who are political junkies, and I know there are a few here in the audience, you know, I won 23 congressional districts with a Republican Congress member, right? And I came very close in a few others, like Georgia 6, and here is what I believe. I believe that if we can fight to keep this on a level playing field, we can win. But here's what's happening, and you all need to pay attention to this. Right here in this state, your Attorney General has just recused from representing your Secretary of State because in a lawsuit over the voting machines in Kennesaw, the servers were wiped. Even though there was a lawsuit to gain access to information to determine whether or not there was hacking or intrusion into the voting. Now, there is nothing in a democracy more sacred than your vote. So here's what I hope some of you will do. Pay attention about what's happening at the county and city level. Find out who's responsible for your elections. Figure out what you can do to try to prevent any shenanigans. And you know, the shenanigans are sometimes so blatant. Like, you know, in minority areas, the polls close at 7. In, you know, white areas, they close at 8. In minority areas, there's 3 voting machines per precinct. In white areas, there's 10. I mean, some of this is not even very complicated in terms of its prejudice or value. And I believe if there were a thorough investigation, we would find out a whole lot more about what the Russians actually did in our voting systems. We know that they intruded and hacked into voting rolls, and there's increasing evidence that it went further than that. And one of the reasons that I think Virginia had a fast and largely problem-free election is that when they saw, some of you might recall, I think last summer there was a hacking convention in Las Vegas, and the problem was how fast can you hack into and change votes in voting machines. And for these professional hackers, it was like 30 minutes to an hour. So when Virginia saw that, they said, that's it, we're getting rid of all of our optical scanners, we're going back to paper. So if you care as much about the vote as I do, then, you know, join up with organizations, you know, like the League of Women Voters and others to try to figure out how you protect the vote and how you eliminate the prejudice that unfortunately is sometimes, you know, put into the system, so that in 2018 we can fight on a fair playing field. If you fight and lose on a fair playing field, that's one thing. But when you're like me and you look at Wisconsin, where they suppress between 200 and 300,000 votes, you know, you kind of say, well, do we really know what would have happened if they hadn't imposed these onerous ID requirements and turned 200 to 300,000 people away from the polls? Not people sitting at home, not showing up, but people who go, people who went with all the ID they had and were told it wasn't the right ID, so go home, you can't vote. So I think that has to be our highest objective. And with respect to 2020, my answer on this is let's win in 2018 and then worry about 2020.
With a final audience question. We actually received, interestingly, several versions of this question, but I'm going to quote my favorite one. This is from Winston Grote, and he wrote, "Can I hug your neck? Thank you for your service to our country and your continued inspiration."
Thank you, Winston.
All right, everyone, so that's the end of the Hillary Clinton event in Atlanta. We did start that stream a little bit late, so what we're going to do now is play for you the beginning of this Hillary Clinton book tour event, in case you guys missed it, because I know you did. We weren't streaming then. Actually, stand by one moment while I get our audio fixed. I'm going to take you to Las Vegas. The Raiders are doing groundbreaking for their new stadium in Las Vegas. This is big news.
The Raiders couldn't be more excited to bring their unique take no prisoners play every second and do your best at all times to the football field, to a city that understands that and appreciates such efforts. So we have a video that's about to play, and everybody stay up here. We have a video that's playing.
I had a dream that someday I would build the finest organization in professional sports.
As soon as I saw the Raiders on television, and the black, and the way they played, and the excitement, I wanted to be a Raider.
The greatest coaches.
John Madden goes on the shoulders of his players.
No let up! No let up! Let's go!
The greatest players.
Your enshrinement in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
The greatest honor.
I always wanted to be a Raider. I'm extremely proud to have been a Raider.
Flame that would burn brightest here is the will to win.
The silver and black are back.
You get everything I got. Four quarters, a total domination. Let's go, baby. Khalil Mack got him. Touchdown! Raiders!
And we can never forget those great fans. The roar would be deafening. To see you all in those silver and black uniforms and have you all individually introduced to the roar of the crowd.
I got chills. Raiders! Couldn't help myself. The Raiders thank all of you and the entire community of Las Vegas, because without you, we wouldn't be here tonight. And it is now official. Raider Nation is coming to Las Vegas. And it's coming with pride, and it's coming with poise. A commitment to excellence and the just win baby spirit of Al Davis and the Raiders. And before you know it, the Raiders' new home, the Las Vegas Stadium, will be standing here on this exact spot in all of its magnificent glory. The brightest city on earth just got a little bit brighter. So thank you for letting me host this historic event, and to all the Raider players, I love you. Now, to send us off with style, please welcome once again Judith Hill. Thank you, Judith.
All right, everyone, for legal reasons, we can't stream music, so I'm going to take you back to that Hillary Clinton event in Vegas. Again, Hillary Clinton in Las Vegas. I'm going to play that for you here on News Now in just a moment.
No foreign power in history has attacked the United States with so few consequences, and that puts us all at risk. And you know, by the way, it's not only the Russians who influenced the results in 2016. I know there's been some talk lately about so-called rigged elections. Well, there's no better example of an attempt to rig an election than the massive voter suppression we have seen across America. That is meant to shrink the electorate. Laws that make it harder to vote disproportionately hurt minorities, students, and the elderly. That is not a coincidence. That is the intended effect. And this issue hasn't gotten nearly enough attention. As I've said before, and I'll say it again, these new voter ID laws are a blast from the Jim Crow past. If you can't win an election fair and square, you don't deserve to win an election. do these laws undermine people's civil rights? They undermine everything we stand for as a country. And I believe strongly we got to start bringing our country back together. And Americans of every political party and ideology should be outraged and should be doing everything we can to educate voters about their rights and do all that we can to try to bring more people to exercise their civic responsibility. Our problem in America is not that too many people vote, it's that too few people vote, and we've got to do more to get more people to understand what's at stake. Now, the fourth and final lesson I want to mention is one that's very close to my heart. There is no such thing as an alternative fact. The Russian disinformation campaign in 2016 was successful in part because America's natural defenses had been worn down over years by powerful interests that wanted to make it harder to distinguish between fact and fiction. When leaders deny things we can see with our own eyes, like the size of a crowd at the inauguration, or when they refuse to accept settled science when it comes to urgent challenges like climate change, it isn't just frustrating to all of us who pride ourselves on living in the fact-based universe. It is insidious and subversive to democracy, because the first thing that authoritarians and dictators try to do is to basically distort reality, to convince you that their version of the, quote, facts is the version you must accept. And that is something we just cannot afford to let happen. So where do we go from here? Of course, I don't have all the answers, but I wrote this book in part to lay out some of the questions and to provide my best understanding, because I know that there are things we need to be doing right now. We've got to get serious about cybersecurity. We've got to get tough with Putin. We've got to insist on truth and accuracy and hold elected leaders and the press accountable when they fail to meet that standard. And we must refuse to be silent in the face of racism, sexism, bigotry, or rhetoric intended to incite hatred and violence. Now more than ever, we've got to have the courage to stand up for human rights and democracy. And most of all, we must vote in every election, not just the presidential one. So I'm excited to do everything I can going forward, not as a candidate, but as an active citizen. And I'm not going anywhere except right into the middle of the debate about our future. Thank you.
Wow. Well, I have to say, we all love your kind of franker, more looser self. It is just great to have you in the public sphere in that way. And I know that I suspect that there are probably some proud Wellesley people out there. Yeah. As well as, of course, Agnes Scott and other women's powers. So I have some questions I want to ask you. We were also collecting questions from the audience, so we got a lot of questions, so I'm just going to try to include as many as I can and just have a real conversation. But probably the question that got raised the most often by members of the audience, and you touched on it briefly in your remarks, your books talk so beautifully about picking yourself up after the pain of losing the election, but that one of the things that you were most intent on was that it not discourage young women from entering the political arena. And so we got a lot of versions of this question, is what is your advice to young women who want to enter politics? What is your recommendation to them? And how do they find the courage? And I just want to quote Sydney, age 12, who says, how do you have enough courage to do everything you do?
Oh, Sydney. Oh. I get this question a lot, and it really is so important that we send a clear, unmistakable message to our girls and young women that you are valuable, that your voice counts, that you have the power to shape your own future, that you should do everything you can to pursue your dreams. And that's why in the concession speech, which I never thought I would have to give, but I did, the morning after the election, I addressed that specifically to young girls because I knew how many, and I'm talking about really young girls, I mean 5, 6, 7, 8, I knew how many had come to my rallies, come to my events. I saw them in the audiences. I saw them on their dad's shoulders. I saw them holding their mom's hands. I saw them on rope lines. I saw them, and I saw the expressions on their faces about what was possible. And so I didn't want what happened in the 2016 election to cast a pall over what they believed possible about their lives. So what I would say is really several things. And first, I want to address parents and grandparents, if I could. Because by the age of 6, little girls believe they're not as smart as little boys. They pick it up from the culture. They pick it up from the media. They may pick it up from even within their family or their very beginning experience in school. And it's just flat out wrong. They haven't even been in school long enough to find out who's smart and how smart they are and all the rest of it. So parents and grandparents, family members, really do have an opportunity, and I would hope a responsibility, to try to make sure that they build the confidence of both their daughters and their sons, and that they encourage both to pursue their interests, and that they really challenge their kids to not only learn as much as possible and take every advantage of school and exercise because that's good for the brain. And when they're really little, read and talk and sing to your kids so that you are developing a strong vocabulary, but also to make it absolutely clear that you're going to support your daughters as they maybe, venture out a little bit, that they try some things that are maybe a little challenging for them. If they're not particularly interested in athletics, finding something else like dance or something that they can try, but just really nurturing that spark. And then as they get older, we know that as girls enter middle school, their early teens, the media is just absolutely sending messages that undermine self-confidence and self-esteem. You're not tall enough, you're not thin enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not popular enough. And that has always been around, but it's magnified on social media to such an extent that so many girls have their confidence shaken by their participation in social media. And there is a lot more anxiety and depression among young kids, and particularly among young girls. And this is a shocking statistic, but the leading cause of death worldwide of young women between 15 and 19 is suicide. So I think we are just beginning to come to grips with the oversized influence that social media has on how young people, and particularly young girls, view themselves. And so we have to stand up against cyberbullying, and we have to kind of reinforce these young kids. And I started my morning in New York at an event for the Child Mind Institute that was releasing a report about mental health among adolescents. And the person who spoke before me was a young woman, 15 or 16, who had a crippling depression, thought that she was, really just lost, didn't think life was worth living. And her parents were aware that she was not happy. And finally, her mother just basically just grabbed her in a big hug and said, whatever it takes, we want you to be happy, and we'll do whatever we can to help you. And so she got treatment, and she was there to talk about it. So I think that the psychological stresses on girls today is much greater than I certainly remember it, even back in the day of raising my daughter, or certainly, growing up myself, in part because of this totally 24/7 media environment that we all live in. So if you're interested in politics, I would say, number one, learn everything you can about history, about different cultures. Seek out people who are not like yourself to learn what's on their minds. I mean, if you're in a school where there's a lot of diversity, really find the opportunity to meet and spend time with people who you can maybe learn something from in terms of their experience and what they're going through, because what we're going to need from our leaders in the future are people who can listen well, who can pull information together to try to solve problems, who can demonstrate empathy and kindness, because we've got to bring people back together, and we've got to break down all these barriers that too often keep people looking at each other as though we were all aliens from some other planet. I think also, as you get older, if you're interested in campaigns, volunteer on a campaign. I had the most amazing volunteers on the campaigns that I've run, the 2 campaigns for the Senate, my 2 presidential campaigns, and they were primarily young people. And the thing about volunteering on a campaign is you have no idea what you might get asked to do and what you can learn because of that. And I think working on campaigns is great as you get older, maybe in college, looking for internships with people who are already in public service, seeing how that feels to you, and then obviously find a way when you finish your education to go into some area, whether it's political or public service, elected officials, where you can really learn even more and you can figure out how to best serve. The final thing I would say is you do have to work on a couple of traits. One, don't get crushed by criticism, because you're going to get it no matter how hard you try to avoid it. So you can take criticism seriously by saying, okay, maybe my critic has something to teach me, but don't let anybody pull you down, and don't let anybody really rip you apart, because that is often far more about the other person than about you. And they often are doing that to you because they have a different partisan agenda or ideological agenda or commercial agenda, whatever their particular approach would be. So, yeah, I mean, you've just got to get prepared for that. Practice public speaking, even if it's just, in front of your dog. If you can keep your dog's attention, I mean, that's a good first step. But you do have to learn how to express yourself. And I've known people who thought they were too shy to get involved in political life at all. And through really diligent practice, they have learned how to express themselves in front of a crowd, often, with a give and take back and forth. And you just have to learn how to do that because you want your voice to be heard. And then finally, as a woman, you have to speak up. And you have to express your opinions. Look, we've all had that experience where you're in a meeting and maybe you're the only woman, or maybe one of 1 or 2 or 3, and one of the women says something and nobody pays any attention, and then a few minutes later one of the men says something and people go, that's a great idea. And so part of it part of it is just to really stand up for yourself, not in a, slapping the table, yelling and screaming way, but just to say, yeah, when I mentioned that, a few minutes ago, I've given it more thought, and I appreciate the support that John
Great advice. One of my favorite parts of the book is the way in which you convey your love of policy. You are a policy wonk. You have had a long and incredibly distinguished career as a change agent, and the way you talk about balancing pragmatism and principles, I think that the art of politics is something that I think is also so important for young people to understand. And I was very moved by how you described your relationship with Marian Wright Edelman, the amazing founder of the Children's Defense Fund. Right. We were privileged to have her on the Agnes Scott campus this fall at a women's college gathering. What an amazing, feisty, extraordinary woman. And you describe how she was your mentor, one of your first bosses, somebody who you worked with really closely, and then you had a falling out. You and Bill supported welfare reform as a compromise. She and her husband were publicly deeply against it. And then over time, you healed that rift and worked together again to pass CHIP, the Children's Health Insurance Plan. So I'd love to hear your reflections on that, on how we work together with people where we may not draw the lines of compromise the same ways. How do we keep working together on the same
That's a great question, Elizabeth, and it's a really good example, which is why I write about it in the book. Marian, a graduate of Spelman College, was one of my first icons, really. She had gone from Spelman to Yale Law School, and 10 years later, I showed up at Yale Law School, and I had just literally read an article about this woman who was the first African-American woman to pass the bar in Mississippi, who went to work for the Legal Defense Fund, and who understood early on that one of the biggest civil rights issues was the treatment of children. And so she focused in on providing services for kids in Mississippi originally, and then through the Head Start program when that passed. She was very close to Dr. King, and was somebody who walked the walk. She really cared deeply about the whole agenda of equality and justice. So when I was just starting off at Yale, I literally just saw a little note on a bulletin board. We used to have things called bulletin boards. And the note said she was coming to Yale to speak, and so I had to be there, and I heard her speak, and it was the same experience you're describing at the Agnes Scott event, because she's so intense, and she's so passionate, and she cares so much. And so I went up to her afterwards, and I said to her, you've got this new organization called the Children's Defense Fund. Could I go to work for you this summer? And she goes, sure, except I can't pay you. And I said, well, if I can figure out how to get paid, can I have a job? And she goes, sure, if you can figure out how to get paid and I don't have to pay you, you can have a job. So I got something called the Law Student Civil Rights Research Council grant, which paid me to work for Marian that summer. And then I went back to work for her after I graduated from law school and stayed involved with the Children's Defense Fund, was on the board for a long time. So our agendas were absolutely in sync when we were advocates. Being an advocate means you take a position and you have to know it, you have to understand it, and you get out there and you push for it, you try to persuade people. So whether it was the work we did to get juveniles out of adult jails or prevent other problems in the criminal justice system, or convince the Congress in 1975 to open up our schools to children with disabilities. I mean, we just worked 24/7 to make the case for what we believed in. And we didn't always get everything we wanted. Sometimes you had to make necessary compromises over legislation, but we never wavered from our advocacy. So when Bill was president and we were facing, very concerted opposition to a lot of what he was trying to do, one of the biggest problems we faced was a government shutdown that the Republicans brought about. And they said the only way they would reopen the government and get it going again was if Bill would sign a piece of legislation that was really bad for Medicaid, really bad for people on welfare. It was just a terrible, punitive effort to try to punish people. Okay. So he vetoed it twice. And then they came back with another version that took a lot of what he had demanded and put it in the bill. But if I'd been an advocate on the outside as opposed to somebody trying to figure out how we get some things done that we wanted done while working with a recalcitrant Congress, if I'd been an advocate, I would have probably taken exactly the same position that Marion took, which is, this is not a good compromise, you shouldn't sign it, don't do that. But having the unique perspective of being both inside and outside over the course of the last many years, I supported it as a necessary compromise. And of course, I believed that under the Clinton administration, it would be implemented in a way that would be to the benefit of the vast majority of people. And indeed, in those remaining years of Bill's presidency, tens of thousands of people got work training, got education, got child care credit, got lots of good stuff. Now, of course, once a different administration came in, a lot of that was cut back, and a lot of the funding was decreased dramatically. So when Marion and I had our disagreement, it was personally very painful. But we're both mature, and we both understand that in politics as well as life, lots of times you make trade-offs, and they're not something you necessarily would have if you hadn't had to, but you do. And so when, after a couple of years, I wanted to work on the Children's Health Insurance Program, and my greatest outside ally was Marion and the Children's Defense Fund. So we began working to get the CHIP program, which, as you may know, provides insurance to 9 million kids around the country. And right now, right now it's in danger because it hasn't been reauthorized by the Congress. So at the end of the year, states may have to start rescinding health care for kids with chronic conditions and congenital conditions and traumatic conditions. So I think I put it in the book because compromise has become kind of a dirty word on both the right and the left. If you think you have the answer to all of life's problems, you don't want to listen to anybody else, and it's your way or the highway, and I think that's a terrible mistake in a democracy. So part of what I wanted to explain in the book is, in most democracies, you don't get 100% of what you want. But you just keep fighting, and you never give up to keep moving forward, to get as much as you can and to hold your ground. And, we saw a perfect example of that when, for 7 years, the Republicans went around yelling, repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. And then, like the proverbial dog that catches the car, they had no idea what to do. And
as you think about moving forward, our country moving forward, I think the other, I asked you about kind of how we find places of compromise. Another part that I just found really profound in your book is, your book ends on this theme of radical empathy, of love and kindness. And yet you also struggle, and I think many of us, I certainly personally have struggled with these seemingly opposing emotions. One being that we do need to empathize with one another, including those who are on the other side, and exercise that kind of radical empathy. And yet this election also raised and brought to the surface things that are truly ugly.
Right.
Racism, xenophobia. So how do you balance that?
Wow, I give a lot of thought to this, and that's also why, literally at the end of the book, I have a chapter called Loving Kindness, because I do think we have to be willing to reach out. We have to try to listen, but that doesn't mean you sacrifice your core values, and also you don't sacrifice what I believe, at least, are America's core values. So I think diversity and inclusivity are core values of our country, and it gives us it gives us a chance to be even better than we are today in the future. So when I think about trying to reach out to people who are very determined to pursue their own agendas, have no interest in compromise, and we're certainly seeing a lot of that in Washington today, I think there are a couple of ways you have to approach it. I would say that you've got to try to figure out, well, what are issues you might have in common so that you can use them to make a larger point. Now, for example, the Congress is about to take up a so-called tax reform bill that is nothing but a budget-busting, debt-increasing giveaway to the wealthiest Americans. There's just no other way to put it. So, one of the things that the president said during the campaign is that he would never touch Medicare and Medicaid. Remember that? Well, you cannot give the kind of tax breaks to the wealthiest unless you come up with some money. And so it looks like they're going to dramatically cut Medicare and Medicaid. So a lot of the people who supported him heard him say that. So if all you do is to say that their tax reform proposals are a big giveaway to the wealthiest 1%, actually will raise taxes on half the people, you may or may not be heard. But if you say, it looks like they're going to have to cut Medicare to fund their tax plan, what do you think about that? Then it's something that is valued by a lot of people in our country across all kinds of divides. So you have to keep looking for areas where maybe you can dig out some common ground. And I think that to some extent happened with healthcare. Because when they began trying to figure out what to do with this car they'd caught and to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, as was famously said by the president, health care is complicated. Look, I have 25 years of scars to prove that. And so all of a sudden, you might know somebody who got a subsidy on the exchange. You might know somebody living in a state that expanded Medicaid, and they have been working hard all their lives, but they made, too much for Medicaid before, but now they're eligible, and they could finally go take care of that chronic condition or find out what was wrong with them. So all of a sudden it becomes personal. And the more we can personalize it, the more room there is for empathy to take place and for people to understand what's really at stake in a lot of these debates.
Thank you. So I guess, gosh, there's so many things I'd love to talk to you about, but I'll just ask one more question. And that's, I know, on a lot of people's minds, because a lot of people ask this, is let's put it this way: what's next for you? You write about Eleanor Roosevelt,
yes.
a shero who had continued throughout her career to have extraordinary public impact. I know there are lots of people here who hope that you will run again. There are no doubt others who are curious who you would encourage to run in 2020. But I think all of us are curious about what's next for you.
What happened, as it was for my friends, my supporters, the voters who put their faith in me. And then I realized there were all these people, and I thought it was kind of odd, to be honest. There were all these people who were saying things like, go away, don't talk. I mean, if they had left me alone, I might still be wandering in the woods. I mean, really. They didn't, and I'm sitting there thinking, I don't remember them saying that to Mitt Romney or to John McCain or John Kerry or Al Gore. I don't remember that. And I'm sitting there thinking, I actually got more votes than anybody except Barack Obama in 2008. It was a little bit hurtful at first, and I thought, oh, forget it, who cares, right? And I'm going to write this book, I'm going to figure out, sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes I figure out what I'm thinking by writing what I am trying to write, and then all of a sudden it becomes clearer to me. So by the time I turned in the book, I recorded the audio in July, and then, it came out in September. And it's so serendipitous because, a lot of what I was saying 6 months ago did not have, shall we say, much support in the press or even the public. Oh, there she goes about the Russians again, all of that. And, every day that goes by, we learn something else. And so I have said many times that if it had been reversed and I had been in the White House, even if I had won the office, I would have had a presidential commission that would have had subpoena power to get to the bottom of what happened. And because that was sort of not responsibility to, okay, I've got to do this. So I will finish out this year on the book tour. I've got, I think, maybe 7 more events like this across the country, and then, probably 7 or 8 more book signings. And I have to tell you, I find being with all of you, and I find these events and signings that I'm doing to be incredibly reassuring, because it's a very emotional experience for me, and I imagine, for some of you as well, but sort of, seeing the the energy and the determination of people watching what happened in Virginia, which was so exciting to see people, and the women who had never run for office ever, getting out there and just determined to tell their truth and to do their best. It was exactly what we need right now in America, across the nation. So I'm gonna spend a lot of 2018 doing everything I can to help elect Democrats, and in particular, to help elect a majority in the House and the Senate. And I don't think that's at all far-fetched. It will be a lot of work. But for those of you who are political junkies, and I know there are a few here in the audience, I won 23 congressional districts with a Republican Congress member, right? And I came very close in a few others, like Georgia 6, and here is what I believe. I believe that if we can fight to keep this on a level playing field, we can win. But here's what's happening, and you all need to pay attention to this. Right here in this state, your Attorney General has just recused from representing your Secretary of State because in a lawsuit over the voting machines in Kennesaw, the servers were wiped. Even though there was a lawsuit to gain access to information to determine whether or not there was hacking or intrusion into the voting. Now, there is nothing in a democracy more sacred than your vote. So here's what I hope some of you will do. Pay attention about what's happening at the county and city level. Find out who's responsible for your elections. Figure out what you can do to try to prevent any shenanigans. And the shenanigans are sometimes so blatant. Like, in minority areas, the polls close at 7. In, white areas, they close at 8. In minority areas, there's 3 voting machines per precinct. In white areas, there's 10. I mean, some of this is not even very complicated in terms of its prejudice or value. If there were a thorough investigation, we would find out a whole lot more about what the Russians actually did in our voting systems. We know that they intruded and hacked into voting rolls, and there's increasing evidence that it went further than that. And one of the reasons that I think Virginia had a fast and largely problem-free election is that when they saw, some of you might recall, I think last summer there was a hacking convention in Las Vegas, and the problem was how fast can you hack into and change votes in voting machines. And for these professional hackers, it was like 30 minutes to an hour. So when Virginia saw that, they said, that's it, we're getting rid of all of our optical scanners, we're going back to paper. If you care as much about the vote as I do, then, join up with organizations, like the League of Women Voters and others to try to figure out how you protect the vote and how you eliminate the prejudice that, unfortunately, is sometimes, put into the system, so that in 2018, we can fight on a fair playing field. If you fight and lose on a fair playing field, that's one thing. But when you're like me and you look at Wisconsin, where they suppress between 200 and 300,000 votes, you kind of say, well, do we really know what would have happened if they hadn't imposed these onerous ID requirements and turned 200 to 300,000 people away from the polls. Not people sitting at home, not showing up, but people who go, people who went with all the ID they had and were told it wasn't the right ID, so go home, you can't vote. So I think that has to be our highest objective. And with respect to 2020, my answer on this is let's win in 2018 and then worry about 2020.
With a final audience question. We actually received, interestingly, several versions of this question, but I'm going to quote my favorite one. This is from Winston Grote, and he wrote, "Can I hug your neck?" Thank you for your service to our country and your continued inspiration.
Thank you. Thank you, Winston.
Hello, everyone. This Hillary Clinton book tour event officially over. So as promised, I'm going to show you this video of Roy Moore issuing a statement following accusations of sexual misconduct. In case you guys missed it, I'm going to play it for you now.
Okay, thank you all for being here tonight. I thank all the people in Gallant that have come at this late hour and for being here. I want to address what's been brought out on television today by Gloria Allred and a client that she has about things I allegedly did. I want to make it perfectly clear. The people of Alabama know me. They know my character. They know what I've stood for in the political world for over 40 years. And I can tell you without hesitation, this is absolutely false. I never did what she said I did. I don't even know the woman. I don't know anything about her. I don't even know where the restaurant is or was. And if you look at this situation, you'll see that because I'm 11 points ahead, or 10 or 11 points ahead, this race being just 28 days off, that this is a political maneuver and has nothing to do with reality. It's all about politics. And I'd like to let my wife make a few statements.
I've been married to this man for 32 years. We've been together for 33 altogether. He has never one time lifted a finger to me. He is the most gentle, most kind man that I have ever known in my life. He's godly, he's loving, and everybody in this community knows it. These are our church members, these are our family, these are our friends, these are people that know him just like I do. These things are false, and it's ugly. It's the ugliest politics that I've ever been in my life.
Thank you.
Judge Moore, Beverly Young Nelson says she'll testify.
Okay, thank y'all for being here tonight. I thank all the people in Gallant that have come at this late hour and for being here. I want to address what's been brought out on television today by Gloria Allred and a client that she has about things I allegedly did. I want to make it perfectly clear. The people of Alabama know me. They know my character. They know what I've stood for in the political world for over 40 years. And I can tell you without hesitation, this is absolutely false. I never did what she said I did. I don't even know the woman. I don't know anything about her. I don't even know where the restaurant is or was. And if you look at this situation, you'll see that because I'm 11 points ahead, or 10 or 11 points ahead, this race being just 28 days off, that this is a political maneuver and has nothing to do with reality. It's all about politics. And I'd like to let my wife make a few statements.
All right, everyone. So that was Roy Moore making a statement. Some of you may have missed the fifth accuser who spoke out with attorney Gloria Allred earlier today, so I'm going to play that next for you.
Thank you so much. Yours or the other? Good. Okay. Thank you very much for coming today. I'm attorney Gloria Allred. I'll be making a statement, and then my client, whose name I shall provide, will be making a statement. I'll be taking questions afterwards. She will not be taking any questions, and we'll state the reasons for that shortly. I'm here today with a very brave woman from Alabama who alleges that when she was a minor, that she was sexually assaulted by Roy Moore. She alleges that at the time of the alleged assault, Mr. Moore was a district attorney in Etowah County, Alabama. Mr. Moore subsequently became an Alabama Supreme Court justice and had the unique distinction of being twice removed from that court for ethical violations. This new accuser of Roy Moore is here with me today. Beverly Young Nelson has chosen to come forward because she thinks that it is important to share what she alleges was her experiences with Mr. Moore when she was 15 and 16 years old. Beverly, with some exceptions, has kept her secret for more than 40 years. She did disclose what she alleges occurred with Mr. Moore to some close family members. She did not, however, speak out publicly because she feared Mr. Moore and the power that he had. Today, however, inspired by Mr. Moore's other accusers, she has found the courage to break her silence. Beverly contacted me to enlist my help and support in coming forward publicly with what she stated were truthful statements. Beverly gave our law firm permission to speak to her family members, to whom she had previously disclosed what happened to her when she was a minor. We have spoken to Beverly's mother and sister, Her sister has indicated that within 2 years of the alleged incident, Beverly told her about what happened with Mr. Moore when Beverly was still a teenager, and that they discussed it numerous times over the years, because Beverly would become upset when she saw Mr. Moore on television, and it would trigger the memories of what he had allegedly done to her. We also spoke with Beverly's mother, who is 77 years old. She vividly recalls that approximately 4 years ago, Beverly told her what had happened when she was a child. Her mother told us that Beverly was a very truthful person and that she completely believed her. Her mother told us that she asked Beverly why she had not told her mother at the time. Beverly told her that Mr. Moore had said that no one would believe her, and Beverly was afraid of Mr. Moore. Beverly's mother told us that she told Beverly that, quote, "Your mother will always believe you," end quote. Beverly's sister also told us that she had no doubt that Beverly was telling the truth, and that the events with Mr. Moore continued to impact Beverly throughout the years. We also confirmed with John, her husband, who is here today, that before he and Beverly were married, that she told John what Mr. Moore had done to her, and that John had urged Beverly over the years to come forward and speak about what happened. Beverly is willing to testify under oath to the statement that she will be making today. We urge the United States Senate Judiciary Committee to hold a public hearing as soon as possible. Beverly is willing to voluntarily appear at such a hearing to testify under oath. She is willing to answer any questions that the senators might ask her relevant to her allegations against Mr. Moore. We believe that the Judiciary Committee should subpoena Mr. Moore to answer questions under oath regarding his alleged conduct with Beverly and the other accusers. Pending the United States Senate's decision as to whether a hearing will be held, Beverly has decided to decline interviews with the press. However, if the Senate does not schedule a hearing to be held within 2 weeks from today, then Beverly will answer questions in a different public forum. Mr. Moore's response to accusations of inappropriate behavior has been to deny, attack, and threaten to sue. We believe that since Mr. Moore is seeking a seat in the United States Senate, he should support testimony under oath before the Senate Judiciary Committee so that the facts can be determined in an open forum and in a fair manner. Mr. Moore may attack me as bringing Beverly forward because I am a Democrat. I would point out that I did not contact Beverly. She contacted me. Further, I have a public record of attacking Democrats who are or have been elected officials when they have been accused of injustices against women. For example, I filed a lawsuit against Democratic Mayor Bob Filner of San Diego and publicly accused him of sexually harassing the city's communications director. As a result of the mediation of our lawsuit, Mayor Filner resigned as mayor. In addition, I publicly criticized Anthony Weiner, a former Democratic congressman, regarding the sexting scandal. I also went on record criticizing former President Clinton when it became clear that he had lied about Monica Lewinsky. When it comes to injustices, it makes no difference to me whether a politician is a Democrat or a Republican. Our client has shown extraordinary courage by coming forward against an extremely powerful politician with powerful allies. She feels that it is her duty to speak out at this time, and we applaud her courage. Can you move over a little, please, to the
name is Beverly Young Nelson. I was born on November 14, 1961 in Santa Maria, California. My husband John and I have been married for 13 years. He has taken time off from work as a truck driver to be here with me today, and I thank him for that. When I was 15 years old, I began working after school. I was attending Gadsden High School. I worked at the old Hickory House, which was on East Meagan Boulevard, off of Highway 431 in Gadsden. I worked there after school as a waitress. Some nights I worked until 7 p.m. and other nights until 10 p.m. Mr. Roy Moore was a regular customer. He came in almost every night, and he would stay until closing time. He sat at the counter in the same seat night after night, and I remember exactly where he sat. Mr. Moore was an adult. He was much older than I was. I knew that he was the district attorney in Etowah County. I did not understand what that meant, but I did know that he was an important person, and I always treated him with respect. When he was at the restaurant, he would speak to me and would sometimes pull the ends of my long hair as I walked by him. I had red hair down to my waist. He would compliment me on my looks, and I did not think anything of it. I did nothing to encourage his flirtatious behavior. I was accustomed to men flirting with me because I was a well-developed and competed in beauty pageants. I did not attach any significance to Mr. Moore's behavior towards me, and I did not respond to any of Mr. Moore's flirtatious behavior for 2 reasons. First, I had a boyfriend. Second, if I had not had a boyfriend, I was not interested in having a dating or sexual relationship with a man that was twice my age. I turned 16, November the 14th, 1977. About a month later, I received my yearbook from Southside High School, where I spent my freshman and my sophomore years. I happened to bring my yearbook to work with me to the restaurant on December the 22nd, 1977. I put it down. I put it down at the end of the counter. Mr. Moore happened to notice it, and he asked me if he could write in my yearbook, and I felt flattered, and I said yes. He wrote in my yearbook as follows: to a sweeter, more beautiful girl. I could not say Merry Christmas. Christmas 1977. Love, Roy Moore, Old Hickory House. And it signed it Roy Moore, D.A. I took the yearbook home with me at the end of my shift that day, and I felt honored that Mr. Moore, who was such an important person, would write in my book. A week or two later, I was working at the restaurant, and my shift ended at 10 o'clock when the restaurant closed. It was a cold night, and I went outside to wait for my boyfriend to pick me up and drive me home. My boyfriend was late, and Mr. Moore exited the restaurant at the same time as I did. He noticed that my boyfriend was not there, and he offered me a ride home. I trusted Mr. Moore because he was the district attorney. I thought that he was simply doing something nice by offering to drive me home. I did not want to wait outside in the cold, so I agreed. I wanted to call my boyfriend, but this was way back before cell phones. I had no way to contact him. My home was only about 2.5 miles away. I planned to call my boyfriend after I got home to let him know that I had gotten a ride and that there was no need for him to pick me up. Mr. Moore was wearing brown hush puppies on his feet. He drove a 2-door car. I believe that it was an old car, but I do not recall the model. I got into his car in the passenger seat, and he began driving. I thought he would get on the highway, but instead he drove to the back of the restaurant. I was not immediately alarmed, as there was an exit from the back of the restaurant to the street, and he could drive there to my house without getting on the highway. However, instead of driving to the street, he stopped the car. He stopped the car and he parked his car in between the dumpster and the back of the restaurant where there were no lights. The area was dark and it was deserted. I was alarmed and I immediately asked him what he was doing. Instead of answering my questions, Mr. Moore reached over and began groping me and putting his hands on my breast. I tried to open my car door to leave, but he reached over and he locked it so I could not get out. I tried fighting him off while yelling at him to stop. But instead of stopping, he began squeezing my neck, attempting to force my head onto his crotch. I continued to struggle. I was determined that I was not going to allow him to force me to have sex with him. I was terrified. He was also trying to pull my shirt off. I thought that he was going to rape me. I was twisting, and I was struggling, and I was begging him to stop. I had tears running down my face. At some point, he gave up. And he then looked at me and he told me, he said, "You're just a child." And he said, "I am the district attorney of Etowah County. And if you tell anyone about this, no one will ever believe you." He finally allowed me to open the door, and I either fell out or he pushed me out. I was on the ground as he pulled out of the parking area behind the restaurant. The passenger door was still open as he burned rubber, pulling away, leaving me laying there on this cold concrete in the dark. I got up and I tried to pull myself together as I was making my way to the front of the restaurant when my boyfriend arrived. It was late, it was dark, and I did not say anything to him as to what had occurred, as he had a very violent temper. And I was afraid that he would do something that would get him into trouble. When I got home, I went to my room, and the following morning, my neck was black and blue and purple. In the days following, I covered the bruising on my neck with makeup. I did not tell anyone about what had happened. I was scared. I felt that if I told anyone that Mr. Moore would do something to me or my family, and I decided to keep what happened to myself. the day after Mr. Moore assaulted me.
All right, everyone. So that was just a portion of this afternoon's press conference, by the 5th Roy Moore sexual assault accuser, along with her attorney, Gloria Allred. You guys are looking at a live look at the White House right now, a live look at Washington, D.C. Earlier today in Washington, D.C. at the Capitol, we had Senate Minority Leader and House Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi speaking about tax reform. So we are going to play this for you now. I know we haven't played it for you yet.
The country. They are slapping around the Republican heartland, the Republican base, and they think they can get away with it, but they can't. You don't have to take it from us. Just listen to the Republican leaders. Both Senator McConnell and Speaker Ryan have backed off their repeated promise not to raise taxes on the middle-class family and have admitted that some families will see an increase. Those admissions will be like nails on the chalkboard to voters heading into next year's midterms. And who'll get hit hardest? People who will get hit hardest are the middle-class swing voters, millions of them, who live in suburbs throughout the country. Both the House and Senate bills would levy a suburban tax on middle-class families from coast to coast and in every state. We know Republicans are struggling in the suburbs. Last Tuesday's elections were proof positive of that. And the tax bill makes their problem only worse. They're a little bit like Thelma and Louise, heading off the cliff.
Exactly right.
Just this weekend, that one was not in my notes. I came up with that.
You must have conveyed it.
You did. Just this weekend, we learned from the Joint Committee on Taxation, 19 million middle-class households would pay more in taxes. The New York Times went even further, said 1/4 of middle-class families would see their taxes go up in the first year alone. What are the Republicans thinking? Regardless of the specific numbers, on one point, all studies agree. This is a tax hike for millions of middle-class families, and many of those hardest hit live in the suburbs, the bedrock of the Republican coalition for decades. Passing a bill that raises taxes on the middle class while slashing them for the rich and wealthiest corporations is political insanity, plain and simple. With one hand, the Republicans are giving huge handouts to the wealthy and corporations. With the other, they're taking away key suburban deductions like state and local, medical expenses, student loans, and more. In trying to pass this bill, congressional Republicans are doing their best to put their majorities at risk. If Republicans thought it was hard winning elections last week with the drag of an unpopular president weighing them down, wait till the voters hear about this bill as they are now. If Republicans thought it was hard to win after trying to pass a health care bill that would raise premiums and kick millions off their insurance, wait until they see how hard it will be to win elections after they've raised taxes on millions in the middle class while showering the rich and biggest corporations with tax giveaways. Republicans seem to think this tax reform plan is the cure of what ails them. We think it's more like a nail in their coffin. While Republicans are busy begging their donors to stay in the fold until they get their tax cut, Democrats are going on offense and talking to the middle class about how bad this bill would be for them. Dozens of House candidates fanned out across the country today and over the weekend to call out their Republican opponents for selling out their constituents. As we speak, the Democrat assemblyman from Utica, who is running for Congress, and the Republican county executive from Utica are standing together, urging their Congress member not to vote for this bill. This morning, many mayors, Democrat and Republican, from across New York State, gathered in Albany to urge the Republican congressional delegation in New York not to vote for this bill. So they're hearing it right off the bat. Just about every single member of the Democratic caucus has spoken out against these tax plans, with dozens holding events back in their states. And we're just getting started. We have two great pickup opportunities right off the bat in Arizona and Nevada. Just listen to how the bill affects them. According to the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, over 435,000 taxpayers in Arizona will see an increase by the time the House bill is fully implemented. Over 162,000 taxpayers in Nevada will see a tax increase by the time the House bill is implemented. So if this bill were so good for the middle class, it would be Republicans fanning out all over the country trying to sell it. Instead, it's crickets from the Republicans. We don't know yet what the final bill will look like, but we can guarantee our Republican friends one thing. This tax bill will be at the center of our efforts to take back the House and the Senate in 2018. Taxes, combined with health care, will be a powerful 1-2 punch for Democrats on the campaign trail this year. The bottom line is this: the bill is a lose-lose proposition for Republicans. If they fail to pass it, they lose with their donors and the hard right. If they succeed, the political fallout will be catastrophic for them. For the sake of the country, of their party, our Republican colleagues should turn back before it's too late. Leader Pelosi.
Thank you very much, Leader Schumer. Welcome to this side of the Capitol Hill. Welcome back. I'm going to pick up where you left off. First, I wish to associate myself completely with your comments because you have captured the atmosphere in which these decisions are being made in a very political but thoughtful way as well. And God, really, for our country's sake, this isn't really about Democrats and Republicans. It's about the American people. And I want to pick up when you talked about the activism that is going on across the country. Scores of members of Congress and candidates held events across the country to point out what is happening. The assault on the middle class, the assault on America's suburbs. What did the suburbia ever do to the Republicans that they now have to make an assault on them? Because that's where this attack is clearly focused. Republicans are frightened by what happened last Tuesday, not just in Virginia, but in New Jersey and other places across the country. Because in suburban districts, people realized what the decision was in the election. They came out, they voted, and they made a difference. So we are turning up the heat across America. In the heartland of America, Kentucky, Ohio, parts of Pennsylvania, Texas, and the rest, events were held to focus on the injustices of this tax bill. Up and down the West Coast, from New York to Florida, members and candidates and people, just the people turned out to say no to all of this. In some of these meetings, people talked about SALT, the state and local tax deduction, which rubs salt in the wounds of the taxpayers because individuals lose the deductions, corporations do not. It is an assault on the middle-income families across our country who take pride in home ownership, and again, people who pay state and local taxes across the country. So we heard from firefighters talking about what this means to public safety in our communities. We heard from families who use the medical deduction in two places, in San Francisco and in Sacramento. Both of our witnesses talked about family members who have Alzheimer's and the cost to their families. They would not be able to survive economically or health-wise without that deduction. A medical deduction that's been there since 1944, removed. Why? to give a tax cut to the wealthiest people in our country. They heard from students whose participation in college, whose economic viability of attending college depends on the tax deduction, the $2,500 tax deduction. Removed. Why would you do that to our young people, their future, and their families? Why? To give a tax deduction to the high end. The list is a long one. I just mentioned the three, the state and local tax deduction, because it has such an impact not only on the families in terms of their personal finances, but on their communities, public service, education, transportation, you know it. And the Republicans know that local officials and state officials have a responsibility to meet the needs of their people. And if they lose this tax deduction, it hurts. But they still may have to come up with the services, and that means they will have to raise taxes. So this is a terrible game. Now, every day we learn more about the GOP tax scam and the staggering dishonesty of the Republican snake oil pitch. The leader referenced what they're saying about the middle-income tax cut, which isn't true. For days, Speaker Ryan told the American people that everybody gets a tax cut, a brazen falsehood. 38 million middle-class families face a Republican tax hike, and Speaker Ryan wants you to believe, now he says, he misspoke. The GOP tax scam has exposed House Republicans' true contempt for the middle class, and especially those living in America's suburbs. We're going to make sure that that voters understand this. This is the equivalent of what President George W. Bush did when he said he was going to privatize Social Security. People know what that means in their lives, and we made sure that people knew about it. As I say, Tuesday's elections frightened Republicans. Speaker Ryan is about to brand them some of their most vulnerable suburban members with a huge middle-income tax hike. So we have, again, all of this to give tax, $1.5 trillion from Medicare and Medicaid in their budget. $1.5 trillion to corporate America. Corporate America doesn't suffer the deduction elimination. Individuals do. And corporate America gets tax breaks to send jobs overseas. Again, what did the middle class ever do to the Republicans? What did those who wanted to buy homes, establish community in America's suburbs ever do to the Republicans that they're taking this tax scam out on them? Again, I want to mention that in New Jersey, New York, California Republicans who voted for the tax scam will have to answer for it. Pete Roscom in the heartland of America, Rodney Frelinghuysen in New Jersey, Will Hurd in Texas, and in California, I say again, as I have done on a number of occasions, Doug LaMalfa, Tom McClintock, Paul Cook, Jeff Denham, David Valadao, Devin Nunes, Kevin McCarthy, Steve Knight, Ed Royce, Ken Calvert, Mimi Walters, Dana Rohrabacher, Darrell Issa, Duncan Hunter. The New Yorkers understand what this does to their state and to their constituents. That's why so many New York members, Republican members, have said they can't vote for this. What is it they realize that hasn't sunk in with Republicans across the country, especially in California in such a large number? Well, we just want to make sure, and this weekend was a weekend of action to make sure that our constituents in our great states and across the country know what's in store for them with this bill. And you know what? Every day we learn worse things about it. We'll see what they do in the Rules Committee. But we have to save the country from this tax. Yes, it's a gift politically to have them vote for raising taxes on suburban America in order to give tax breaks to the wealthiest people in America. But that's not what we're about. We have to save the country from this unfair tax scam. I just have to tell you these things because it's so incredible. Don't take my word for it about corporate America getting the break. Gary Cohn, what's his title? Whatever it is. Well, whatever, he has a big deal title.
Spreader of mistruths on the tax bill.
But here's one truth he did say. The most excited group out there are big CEOs about our tax plan. Chris Collins from your state, my donors are basically saying, get it done or don't ever call me again. Senator Lindsey Graham said the financial contributions will stop. So Republicans are clearly responding to their donors and CEOs across the country. And while the president was in China with the CEOs cutting ephemeral deals, whatever they might be, Republicans here in Congress were giving tax breaks to those corporations to send jobs overseas. It's just not right. The moment of truth is here. There's so much to tell. It can be confusing. Just want to focus on a few key points that are about growing our economy. We say we're happy to sit down, always have been, to work in a bipartisan way to address any reform in the tax code. What the Republicans are doing is not reform. It's not even a tax cut. It's a tax. It's a tax on middle America. With that, I yield to some questions.
I just want to see what this says.
You emphasized the suburbs here.
Yes.
Of course, when you mentioned going to Ohio and places in Florida, one of the reasons the Democrats won control of the House in 2006 was that you had candidates in outreach in rural areas. This obviously addresses the suburbs. Do you think that you can get there with just these suburban members, or do you have to have some of those rural voters or rural seats that may in fact benefit from this tax?
Can you tell me a place that benefits from this tax bill? They don't pay state and local taxes. They don't have children going to school. They don't have teachers bringing supplies to school and losing their tax break for doing that in order to give tax breaks to the high end. They don't have families that have extraordinary medical expenses. I don't know where you're talking about. We are saying that in this election last week, suburban America spoke up, and the Republicans should hear that. No, we're going across the country with a better deal, better jobs, better pay, better future. And that includes not only bigger paychecks, but lowering costs to America's families. And we're saying we want to return to a place where if we're going to do tax reform, we're going to do it in a bipartisan way. I think that's a message that appeals across the country.
Before the compromise, but when they announced the Senate bill, state and local deductibility, the lowest state in the country in terms of how many taxpayers benefited from the state and local deduction was West Virginia at 17%. Utah was as high as 30%. It is across the country. And to tell 1/5 of your taxpayers that they are going to pay more, that's not tax reform to most Americans, rural, suburban, urban.
On the health care bill, you were able to stop it with this overwhelming grassroots opposition, these rowdy town halls with Republican members. Have you seen the same amount of mobilization on this bill, or are you worried about that?
Well, it's starting. It's reaching that level. I would say the level of mobilization is reaching a very high level. And if you talk to people in the parades this weekend, people were saying, "Why are you raising my taxes?"
Yeah, it's out there, and they were part of some of the events that were held. Some didn't even have members of Congress there. The groups were having their own events across the country. And they're particularly concerned about the fundamental budget that is the predicate for this, about Medicare and Medicaid. But now the Republicans are talking about, the president is talking about eliminating the individual mandate as part of the tax bill. When you get anywhere near health issues, you explode the activism. But they're out there, They're doing their job. We, as you said, could not have won without them before. So making the public aware, they're doing that now. I feel very confident about the approach that they are taking in Republican districts.
It shows you what a pickle they're in. They even have to consider going back to health care, which was just very bad news for them, because this bill, they're tying themselves in a pretzel to try and meet deficit numbers, give tax breaks to the rich, and still try to protect the middle class. The loser in those three was the deficit and the middle class. The rich didn't lose anything. But it's happening out there.
Senator Schumer, on the next election that's closest to us, are Democrats now committed to going full in for Doug Jones in the Alabama Senate race?
It's an Alabama race, and they're running it. They're involved. If they ask us for things, we're going to try to help them, but it's an Alabama race, and the Jones campaign is running it on its own.
So the DCC is not going to get involved? The DCC is not going to get involved?
I answer. When they ask us for help, we'll do it, but it's been an Alabama race, period.
Senator, how can the party, on the one hand, be helpful to a promising candidate, but at the same time not hand the opposition fodder by letting them say, well, this is National Democrats coming in?
Just answer that.
I just answered it. The bottom line is it's being run out of Alabama, by Alabama. He's raising tremendous money without any help from the Democratic organizations. Yeah, the amount of money that's come in even before the Moore scandals was enormous. He had more than 1,000 points of television on for the last 4 weeks. Moore's had none. So this campaign, it's sort of like Georgia 6 in this sense. We hope it'll have a different outcome. As good a job as they did, it was very difficult. But they're raising all the money they need.
Yeah. Is there a Scott Brown similarity here? In 2010, obviously, a very blue state at the time, and Scott Brown actually won that seat despite the demography of that state. Is there a comparison here?
Well, I don't know if I'm going to. I would compare just what's happening around the country. Mm-hmm. The enthusiasm. We were both, Nancy was minority leader. I was head of the DSCC in 2005 and 6. You felt the same thing. Mm-hmm. For instance, while in southwestern Virginia, the ratios didn't change, the enthusiasm was not at a high level. It was much greater in the more suburban, swing, and Democratic areas. We felt the same thing then. We are getting, in 2005, we had lots of candidates, and we always got the best in the Senate. We pick them, and we always got the best candidate. We have gotten our best choice in every race so far. We wanted Jackie Rosen. We wanted Kirsten Sinema. We wanted Beto O'Rourke. So the similarity, you can sort of smell when a wave is beginning. Mm-hmm. No guarantee it continues, but it's likely to. And that smell that was in the air in 2005 is in the air now.
Senator McConnell this morning said he believes the women. He asked Judge Moore to step down. What impact do you think that has on the race in Alabama?
Well, I can't answer that. You'd have to ask the main players. I thought Moore never belonged in the Senate even before these allegations.
Had a case against him.
Yeah.
You said most of the Democratic caucus members have spoken out against this bill. Can you speak to the members of your caucus that aren't speaking out against
I can't recall a one who hasn't said very negative things about the bill. Senator Heitkamp talked about how philosophically it's not what she believes in. She wants to help the middle class. Senator Manchin, very upset by the deficit. I don't know of a one.
So you're confident, both of you are confident?
My members make up their own minds. Of course. But the bill is so bad and so against American principles that the basic letter that 45 of us sent, I think the other three agree with those three principles. No tax breaks for the top 1%, don't blow a hole in the deficit, and don't do it through reconciliation.
If I just may return to your question about 05 and 06 and the scent that the leader was referring to, that scent springs from a below 40% rating for President Trump. And what you'll see now is fresh recruits coming forward, Democrats saying, I think I can win this in a difficult district, and retirements come. We get the fresh recruits, they get the retirements, and the A-team, who has the A-team. And these are not, in the House side, necessarily recruited by us. Many of these people are self-recruited. There are primaries in a number of these districts, and the people will choose. As the leader said in Alabama, it becomes a local, it's a local matter. But what we want to make clear is the differentiation between Democrats and Republicans when it comes to America's working families, and demonstrate that we do have a better deal, better jobs, better pay, better future. We feel very excited about what those prospects are, and put one good day in front of another. I have no doubt that we will have a great victory next year.
Last question, the lady in the back.
Republicans seem pretty confident they're going to have the votes to pass this in the House this week, the tax bill. So given that, your pleas may be falling on deaf ears. Where do you go?
Well, let's wait and see. I don't.
Let's see. And but
just today there were a whole list of members who hadn't committed. They do not have at this point Nancy Lane, but 218 commitments, because I'm counting from afar, the other side of the building.
But they only won the budget vote by 2 votes. Actually 4 votes, but 2 votes swung the other way. It fails. So it's good news and bad news. The bad news is for the American people, should this bill ever become law, and there's a whole road ahead in the Senate on that. The good news is that once people have voted for it, people pay attention to what is that. It takes it to a different level of awareness in the public mind, and that hopefully will help defeat the bill in the Senate. But in terms of America's future, they vote for this bill. There's a political price to pay, not because we're going to make them pay, but because their constituents are going to make them pay. And the Republican leadership is asking their members to walk the plank on a bill that may never become law, but has serious impact on their constituents. President Trump, it's hard for me to say those 2 words in a row. President Trump has imposed on the Congress to take votes that are not really in the public interest. And again, the American people are paying attention. And when they look up and pay attention, we want to be sure they know who's offering them a better deal. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Just one thing, as we said before, it's a lose-lose for them.
Yes, that's
We're
right.
confident of that.
It.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
The country. They are slapping around the Republican heartland, the Republican.
All right, everyone. So that was the end of that press conference. As you can see, it just started replaying. Here's another live look at the White House. We have more news now, including a look at the site where Raiders Stadium in Las Vegas will be. They held an event moments ago, a groundbreaking. We weren't able to show it to you in full, so I'm going to go ahead and play that for you now.
Broken down and
tired of living life on the merry-go-round, but you can't find the fighter, but I see it in you, so we gon' walk it out. And mountains, we gon' walk it out. Mountains, and I rise up, I rise like the day, I rise up, I rise unafraid of rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. Yes, I rise up, high like the waves, I rise up, in spite of the ache, I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, for you, for you, for you. When the silence isn't quiet and it feels like it's getting harder to breathe, and I know you feel like dying, but I promise we'll take the world to its feet and mountains, take it to its feet. Mountains, and I rise up, I rise like the day, I rise up, I rise unafraid of rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, for you, for you, for you. All we need is hope, and for that we have each other, and for that we have each other. We'll rise, we'll rise, we'll rise, we'll rise like the day. And I'll rise like the day, I'll rise up. I won't be afraid, I'll rise up. And I'll do it 1,000 times again. Yes, I'll rise up, high like the waves, I'll rise up. In spite of the ache, I'll rise up. And I'll do it 1,000 times again. Yes, we'll rise up, we'll rise like the day, we'll rise up. We won't be afraid, rise up. And I'll do it 1,000 times. We just want to take a moment and honor and acknowledge the community of Las Vegas. Together we will rise. We rise. We rise up. Open your eyes like the day. Look at the sky. Now it's the time to spread your wings. We rise. It's a beautiful love. It's a beautiful time again. We rise up. High like a wave. We rise up. In spite of the ache, we rise up. Now do it 1,000 times again. We'll rise like the day. Oh.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Judith Hill and the Las Vegas House of Blues Gospel Choir. Ladies and gentlemen, Raiders owner, Mark Davis.
Woo!
Good evening. For the Raiders to be successful and ultimately win, it takes teamwork. Nowhere has the notion of teamwork been better displayed or more evident than in Las Vegas on the evening of October 1st, 2017, when, with the world watching, Mayor Carolyn Goodman, County Commissioner Steve Sisolak, Representative Dina Titus, Sheriff Joe Lombardo, their staffs, all the first responders, emergency health care workers, and local citizenry seamlessly worked together to bring a sense of safety and security to a situation that without teamwork could have resulted in chaos. The Raiders are proud and honored to be joining such a special team, for together we are Vegas strong. Tonight, we are celebrating another display of teamwork. When we told you, help us build it, and we will come, you all answered our call. We formed a partnership, a public-private partnership, a partnership in which everyone wins. And tonight, as a result of that partnership, we are breaking ground on the most magnificent stadium right here in the entertainment capital of the world. For all the players, coaches, administrators, and fans who over the years have proudly worn the silver and black, this is our field of dreams. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts for helping make this dream become reality. Before passing it to our Master of Ceremonies, I would like to introduce someone very special to me, the First Lady of the Raider Nation, my mom, Carol Davis. I'm so happy she could be here to witness this historic event. I only wish my father could be here as well, but I know he's up there smiling proudly. For he always said that the greatness of the Raiders is in its future. And thanks to all of you, the future is now. Las Vegas, the Raiders are coming. Raider Nation, please welcome Mr. George Lopez, our Master of Ceremonies.
Thank you, everybody. And listen, thank you so much, Mark, for asking me to be part of tonight's ceremonies for the groundbreaking of the new stadium. I am a tremendous Raider fan. I've always been. I let my hair go a magnificent combination of the silver and black. But when I was growing up, I idolized people like Mr. Jim Plunkett, who was here, the coach Tom Flores, the beautiful Howie Long, the incredible Ray Guy. I don't remember my first kiss, but I remember where I was when I saw Ray Guy punt for the first time. Incredible. All right, so later, and I mean, you know, I was fortunate enough to meet the guys, and they are amazing, and the organization is amazing, and so are the coaches. This is a first-class organization built on passion. It's built on loyalty and pride, and not only on the football field, but in the community as well. So on behalf of the Raiders organization, we would like to welcome some special members of the Las Vegas community who are here with us today. First responders, yes? Yeah, thank you, first responders. The University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Nellis Air Force Base. Chambers of Commerce. The Boys and Girls Club, Opportunity Village, and Safe Nest. And all the union representatives, very important. Union representatives, thank you. The construction representatives, same section. And Las Vegas Youth Sports, yeah. I spent enough time in Las Vegas to know just how special it is. It's compassionate, it's hardworking, and it's those people that make it this way. So thank you again for everything that you've done and will continue to do to make Las Vegas a wonderful, incredible city that it already is. So to everyone here, thank you for allowing me to be part of this. It's an important moment for the Las Vegas Raiders and for Las Vegas. So now I'd like to introduce someone who is in an occupation where you need to be tough, you're going to take a hit if you want to last. I don't know what he runs the 40 in, but let's welcome your governor of the fine state of Nevada, who believed in this project from the beginning, your Honorable Brian Sandoval.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Well, now it's real, right? Yeah. This is one of the most transformative moments, I believe, in the history of Las Vegas. And before I get into some of my thank yous, I too want to offer the thanks from the bottom of my heart to Sheriff Lombardo, the men and women of Metro, Las Vegas Fire, our first responders. There's just so many heroes out there that makes me so proud at this moment to be a Nevadan. Just incredible. But Mark, welcome to the Nevada family. The Raider Nation is now part of the Nevada family. Thank you. And Mrs. Davis, you must be so proud of your son. You know, and I'll share just a quiet moment that I had with Mark in Carson City. And he's told this story over and over again. And we looked each other in the eye, and we shook hands, and we said, this is a deal. And we're both men of our word. And Mark Davis is a man of integrity, and he's a man of his word, and I cannot wait until the Raiders come to Las Vegas because of you. Mm-hmm. And Commissioner Goodell, welcome to Las Vegas. We're very happy that you're here. I know you can't say so, but I don't know if there's a better backdrop in America, if not the world, for an NFL stadium, right? And our Rebel fans, we're going to have a home field for the UNLV Rebels, right? Yeah. And Madam Mayor and Chairman Sisolak, thank you for very much for your leadership. Please give them a big hand. Steve Hill from the Southern Nevada Infrastructure Committee, this wouldn't have happened without you. Please give him a big hand. And the men and women of labor, thank you very much for your support. Yeah. So as I said, this is going to be a transformational moment for all of us. And again, just throwing it out there, Mr. Commissioner, Super Bowl by 2025, right? Yeah. World Cup. It just, as I said, I'm really honored and pleased to be here. On behalf of the people of the great state of Nevada, welcome to our state. Welcome to our family. We really look forward to you coming all here. You know, they call us the Silver State, or the Silver State, and you know now we are the Silver and Black State. Thank you very much. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Well done. Give him a nice round of applause. The Governor of the state of Nevada. I would be remiss if I didn't introduce a couple of people. The Midnight Idol, Mr. Wayne Newton is here. Wayne? And the Chicano Midnight Idol, Mr. Carlos Santana. And Cindy Blackman Santana. Thank you, Governor. And the Raiders have a rich history of success with 15 divisional titles, 4 AFC championships, AFL championship, as well as 3 Super Bowl victories. The NFL has always been fully supportive of the Raiders and their move to the great city of Las Vegas, and we are even more privileged that he is here with us today. Everybody knows it. Governor just introduced him. So please welcome to the stage with a little more applause the Commissioner of the National Football League, Mr. Roger Goodell.
Thank you. Thank you. Governor, you're right on the setting. It's incredible. Only in Vegas can you turn a groundbreaking ceremony into a show. That's how great it is here. But thank you, George, and thank you, Mark and Mrs. Davis, for inviting me to be here with you today. With the governor, the mayor, the chairman.
New football team to the community as we break ground on the new state-of-the-art stadium. Best wishes are extended for many years of success as the Raiders just win, baby, and become a vital, integral part of our community. Thank you very much.
I want to thank you all, obviously, for being here tonight. This is a momentous occasion for us in Las Vegas and Clark County. First off, Mrs. Davis, thank you very much. I'm sure you've got the only son who goes by initials, MD. I mean, we all know him as MD. And Mark Bidet and the great job that they've done for us here. But I want to point you to something. We've got the sheriff in the front row. Joe, if I could ask you to stand just a second. On October 1st, this gentleman stepped up like nobody else did to protect this community. We sincerely appreciate what he did. One of the first phone calls I got were from Mark Davis and Mark Bidet asking how they could help. They had players in hospitals, in police stations, in fire stations, trying to help get us through that time. Those aren't just spotlights you see behind me. There are 58 lights there, representing the 58 lives that were lost on that fateful day. They have been our partners. They continue to be our partners. I want to thank my colleagues on the County Commission. I want to thank certainly the governor for calling this special session and our legislators for passing it, the SNTIC committee, the Stadium Authority, but other folks had a big influence. Our labor force, our building trades have been important to us, our carpenters, our teamsters, but Tommy White and 872 have been here every step of the way. Tommy... You got to teach some of these guys how to turn shovels, though, the way that last demonstration went, you know. But I want to thank you, Ms. Davis, from the bottom of my heart, everybody here in Southern Nevada and the great state of Nevada for what you've done and how you've helped us heal and how you've brought this community together. Thank you for what you're doing, what you continue to do. God bless Raider Nation.
Okay, this is the second groundbreaking, so we will have the people come up with the helmets and shovels, please. Also, it's Las Vegas Raider Day, man. We got to get another tattoo. All right. Thank you. Get your ceremonial shovels. Opportunity Village, Roger Burns. Safe Nest, Alfonso Hernandez. And Fuel Up to Play 60, Miranda Perez. Are bringing up the shovels. Chaparral High School football player Trey Hodge. And the Chaparral High School cheerleader Tatiana Castolo. You guys look great. Thank you. Okay. Let's get in the position for that. And I promise you that the gentleman in the middle of this room will be digging a lot faster and a lot. This is great. Let's put the shovel in the ground. Hold it up. Great. You doing all right? say it's going to take 3 years, but I think those guys right there can do it. I give them 8 months. What do you think, guys? Work out something with the permits. Well done. Well done. Thank you to our community representatives for helping us out. And I think if we hashtag that annoying child, we could get it trending. The Raiders couldn't be more excited to bring their unique take no prisoners play every second and do your best at all times to the football field, to a city that understands that and appreciates such efforts. So we have a video that's about to play, and everybody stay up here. We have a video that's playing.
I had a dream that someday I would build the finest organization in professional sports.
As soon as I saw the Raiders on television, and the black, and the way they played, and the excitement, I wanted to be a Raider.
The greatest coaches.
John Madden goes on the shoulders of his players. No let up. No let up. Let's go.
The greatest players.
Your enshrinement in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Greatest honor.
I always wanted to be a Raider. I'm extremely proud to have been a Raider.
A flame that would burn brightest here is the will to win.
The silver and black are back. You get everything I got. 4 quarters of total domination. Let's go, Brandon. Khalil Mack got him.
And we can never forget those great fans. The roar would be deafening. To see you all in those silver and black uniforms and have you all individually introduced to the roar of the crowd.
I got chills. Raiders! Couldn't help myself. The Raiders thank all of you and the entire community of Las Vegas, because without you, we wouldn't be here tonight. And it is now official. Raider Nation is coming to Las Vegas. And it's coming with pride, and it's coming with poise. A commitment to excellence and the just win baby spirit of Al Davis and the Raiders. And before you know it, the Raiders' new home, the Las Vegas Stadium, will be standing here on this exact spot in all of its magnificent glory. The brightest city on earth just got a little bit brighter. So thank you for letting me host this historic event, and to all the Raider players, I love you. Now, to send us off with style, please welcome once again Judith Hill. Thank you, Judith.
All right, everyone. So we are going to cut out of this Raider event now and take you to another event. We're going to take you to the Philippines, actually, where the UN Secretary General spoke earlier today.
Let me therefore end here and invite Secretary General Guterres to deliver his opening remarks.
Mr. Chairman, distinguished heads of state and government of ASEAN, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor to join you for the 9th ASEAN UN Summit. And I congratulate the government and people of the Republic of the Philippines for your success in chairing ASEAN in its 50th anniversary year. And I congratulate all the government and peoples of ASEAN on the achievements of this milestone. ASEAN was founded at a time of great turmoil in Southeast Asia. 5 decades on, ASEAN is an indispensable partner in ensuring peace, stability, and prosperity in Southeast Asia and beyond. Excellencies, the 5 men who signed the founding ASEAN Declaration were 2 Muslims from Indonesia and Malaysia, a Christian from the Philippines, a Hindu from Singapore, and a Buddhist from Thailand. This is just one sign of remarkable diversity at the heart of your region as we meet at a time of proliferating divisions and crises. Excellencies, Globalization is delivering new opportunities, but increasing economic and social inequalities, heightening citizens' anxieties, and putting pressure on social cohesion. Climate change is exacerbating severe weather events like hurricanes and storms. And I commend ASEAN's leadership at the national and regional level for your decisive action to strengthen resilience and reduce the risk posed by climate change and other natural disasters. I will stress the importance of collective action at the global and regional levels at the COP23 in Germany later this week. Excellencies, as I told the General Assembly of the UN in September, I am extremely concerned by the threat of global terrorism and violent extremism, including in this region. The United Nations is prioritizing support for national and regional efforts to counter terrorism and to prevent violent extremism, including the establishment of a dedicated UN Office of Counterterrorism. We welcome the adoption of the Manila Declaration to counter the rise of radicalization and violent extremism and its recognition of the importance of comprehensive approaches and preventive action. The United Nations stands ready to provide technical support to ASEAN and its member countries in their efforts to counter terrorism and violent extremism and to combat transnational organized crime, including drug trafficking and people trafficking, through comprehensive policies designed to protect citizens with effective law enforcement and respect for human rights. Excellencies, the international community must raise the level of its response to all these complex threats. Multilateralism and regional cooperation will be critical to a peaceful and prosperous future. ASEAN and its member states have made determined efforts to end conflict throughout the last 5 decades. And you also have demonstrated your commitment to global peace and security through your participation in UN peace operations. Last month, I had the opportunity to honor the memory of 4 Cambodian soldiers killed while helping to bring peace and security to the people of Central African Republic. I commend the bravery and sacrifice of some 4,500 military personnel, police and civilians from 8 ASEAN countries who are serving in United Nations missions around the world. Here in the Philippines, I commend your efforts towards peace over many years with the support of other ASEAN countries and civil society. And I'm heartened by the recent liberation of Marawi from ISIS. Continued trilateral cooperation between the Philippines, Indonesia and Malaysia will strengthen regional peace and security. Excellencies, I cannot hide my deep concern with the dramatic movement of hundreds of thousands of refugees from Myanmar to Bangladesh. It is a worrying escalation in a protracted tragedy and a potential source of instability in the region and radicalization. The United Nations welcomes constructive approaches by ASEAN, including the provision of humanitarian aid to northern Rakhine. Since the beginning of the crisis and beyond the end of violence, I have called for unhindered humanitarian access to affected communities and the right to safe, voluntary and dignified return of those who fled to their places of origin. Addressing the underlying issues for implementing the recommendations of the Advisory Commission on Rakhine will also be critical to reverse this tragedy. Excellencies, sustainable and inclusive development is the best way to prevent both conflict and violent extremism. This is at the heart of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, our blueprint for a safe and prosperous future on a healthy planet, and central to the ASEAN Community Vision 2025. Economic growth in this region has lifted millions out of extreme poverty in the past 5 decades. The region was one of the best performers on the Millennium Development Goals. As it powers its way to becoming the world's 4th largest economy by 2050, we look forward to including millions more in the shared benefits of prosperity. In line with the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals, the principles of democratic governance, rule of law, and respect for human rights, the United Nations also stands ready to cooperate with you in strengthening the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights. Excellencies, strengthened partnership with regional organizations, including ASEAN, are a priority for me and a critical pillar of any proposal to reform the United Nations. And I invite all ASEAN member countries to redouble their commitment to strengthening the ASEAN-UN partnership. I'm deeply committed to work with all of you for a quantum leap to be possible in the strategic cooperation between ASEAN and the UN. And I look forward to an open exchange of views. Thank you very much.
All right, everyone, we're now going to go to another press conference from the UN.
The President addressed the General Assembly plenary meeting on the agenda item Sport for Development and Peace, Building a Peaceful and Better World Through Sport and the Olympic Ideal. The President said sport can bring people together and offers young people a platform for empowerment. Referring to the 2018 Olympic Winter Games, which will be held in Pyeongchang, Republic of Korea, he added, "It is more important than ever to reaffirm the ideals of the United Nations and the Olympic Games in the Korean Peninsula." He noted that he himself will be present in Pyeongchang in February and called on all countries to participate there. The General Assembly today adopted a resolution by consensus on the Olympics, by which it urged member states to observe the Olympic truce from the 7th day before the start of the 23rd Olympic Winter Games until the 7th day following the end of the 12th Paralympic Winter Games. Also, in connection with the Olympics today, the President met with the President of the International Olympic Committee and a delegation from the Republic of Korea, which included the Minister of Sport and Education, Olympic gold medalist Kim Yuna, and the head of the Winter Olympics Organizational Committee. He also met with the permanent representative of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea to the UN. The General Assembly plenary also met this morning on the revitalization of the work of the General Assembly. In his remarks, the President said, "The General Assembly cannot be a place to advance our own interests. It cannot be a place we come to with nothing but red lines and static positions. This might be a tempting option, and it can lead to a win for one person, or one state, or one group, but on the whole, we will all lose." The President will be leaving New York this afternoon for Bonn, Germany. On Wednesday, he will address the opening of the UN Climate Change Conference's high-level segment. Ahead of his trip, the President said, "The Paris Agreement is a milestone for multilateralism, but it's not an end in itself. While we discuss how to implement it, people are suffering from the unprecedented and brutal effects of climate change. This common threat binds us together, and only together can we solve it." While in Bonn, the President is expected to hold bilateral meetings with fellow participants, including the Prime Minister of Fiji, who is also the conference president. He will also hold a dialogue with young attendees on how he can best involve youth in his work and address their concerns during the 72nd session. He will be back in the office on Thursday. This afternoon, the General Assembly will meet to continue with the elections for the International Court of Justice. Following the 6 rounds that were held on Thursday, 4 candidates were elected. They are from Brazil, France, Lebanon, and Somalia. They received the required majority of votes in both the General Assembly and the Security Council, but there is still one vacancy that has not yet been decided upon. The candidates from India and the United Kingdom are now competing for that last seat. The 4th Committee, or Special Political and Decolonization Committee, concluded its work on Friday. It approved 39 draft resolutions and 4 draft decisions. It held 28 formal meetings. During its decolonization debate, 116 individuals and organizations addressed the committee as petitioners from several non-self-governing territories. And finally, the 6th Committee, which handles legal matters, also wrapped up its work on Friday. It discussed 24 agenda items and adopted 17 resolutions and 1 decision by consensus. The reports from both the 4th and 6th Committees will be considered by the General Assembly plenary, most probably in December. And that's it from me. Any questions? Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Okay, go ahead, please, Abdelhamid. Or when?
Yeah, in Bonn, what's the PGA's? You said he made a statement here before leaving tomorrow. What's his message going to be there at the conference?
Well, this was just kind of a preview of what he's going to say in Bonn. In general, the president feels that climate change is a threat that doesn't respect national borders. So he would definitely like to see the international community work together to address the common threat. Yes, did you have a question, Abdelhamid?
Thank you. Does the PGA have any plans to visit the occupied Palestinian territories, Gaza Strip and Israel in the near future or during his tenure? Thank you.
As of now, there are no plans for the near future that I can confirm. I have nothing to announce on that. Yes, Matthew.
Sure. I wanted to ask, when, at his stakeout on Friday, the Secretary General referred to a General Assembly pending resolution on Myanmar, which I believe to be the one in the Third Committee that talks about urging him to have a special envoy. I just wanted to know, I guess, from a GA perspective, is the Secretary General, does the PGA believe that the passage of that resolution is required in order for the Secretary General to appoint his own special envoy? And either way, if the vote is tomorrow on the Myanmar and the Third Committee, can you say when the GA vote that would apparently allow Antonio Guterres, in his own thinking, to appoint an envoy would take place in the full GA?
Well, I think it's up to the Secretary General to appoint whatever envoys the Secretary General wants to appoint. So I don't know that he would need to rely on a General Assembly resolution for that. And your other question was about
on timing. I think that the vote in the Third Committee is tomorrow, but when do you know when the things, if the Third Committee's full report will be dealt with by the General Assembly?
Sure. I don't have the date in December when the Third Committee report would be tackled. If I can find it, I'll let you know.
And just because this issue may be gone by later this afternoon, there's a critique of of how ICJ judges are selected by Shashi Tharoor, former UN official, who has said that it's unfair to the GA that the Indian candidate got, he says, 115 votes, the UK got 74, that it sort of frustrates the will of the majority of states that it continues to go on, and that in fact the outcome may, he says, favor the P5. So it's a very kind of G4 statement. But I wanted to know, as the PGA, as representing the GA, does he believe, does he see this incongruity? What does he think of this critique of the process by Shashi Tharoor?
Well, I think if the member states want to change the process for electing the International Court of Justice judges, then they should change the process. The President of the General Assembly would respect the rules of procedure and whatever procedures are in place from the member states on matters like these.
Okay.
Any other questions? Great. Thank you very much.
All right, everyone, that wraps up the stream. Have a good night, and we'll see you tomorrow morning.